Hello and welcome to your final set of notes for Unit 1 on founding documents, this one being about the Bill of Rights. Just to give you a little context, we just finished our conversation about the Constitution, which is the large document that essentially tells us how our government is going to govern our nation. But we also then have to talk about the Bill of Rights. So let's first start our conversation with how it came about. So first, the objectives. So by the end of these notes, you need to be able to describe 3 different amendments within the Bill of Rights. There are 10 total, and you got to be able to describe 3. You need to be able to explain the purpose of the Bill of Rights, just like you need to be able to explain the purpose or significance of the Northwest Ordinance, and explain how the debate between 2 groups of people at the time, the Federalists and Anti-Federalists, resulted in the Bill of Rights. So that's where we begin our conversation about the Bill of Rights, is these 2 sides that arose. And so, you know, these people, the founding fathers who are writing the Constitution, are going around the rather small country at the time, and they're having to get all the states to sign and ratify the Constitution. Well, as they're doing that, these 2 sides arise. So over here on the left, we have the Federalists, and these were 3 very prominent Federalists who were for the Constitution and all that it stood for and the goals that it had. And then we had the Anti-Federalists. Now, the Anti-Federalists were not against our country. They were not against us forming and being independent, right? But they were against some things, or at least they had some concerns about some things in the Constitution, and we'll talk about those details. So first, let's talk about the Federalists, the guys that were very pro-Constitution. They wrote a collection of papers called the Federalist Papers in support of ratifying the Constitution. And the topics that they supported and that they felt really confident about were collecting federal taxes. After the Revolutionary War, and as we are creating our government, we were really broke with the Articles of Confederation that we talked about as being that messed up attempt at government. We had no way to collect taxes, so collecting federal taxes was very important. Another one is a strong national defense, a strong military. They felt that we need to have that at all times ready to go. And then they also very much believed in the systems of separation of powers and the checks and balances we've discussed that were built into the Constitution. They said these 2 systems that we have in place are going to be plenty in order to protect us from any one branch becoming too powerful. They're totally sufficient and going to be great at making sure that we don't have someone take over and have all the power like in an absolute monarchy. So they were confident and said, yes, let's ratify this Constitution. The Anti-Federalists kind of put on the brakes, okay? So they kind of raised some concerns about the Constitution, and it all revolved around the concern that the shift of power was leaving the states and going to a stronger central government. Now, I want you to listen to what I'm saying here and jot this down on the left-hand side. I want you to write the word federalism. Now, we talked about the word federalism in our last set of notes, which means the power of a government resides mostly in one central government, with then some power being in the state governments, right? Well, that's why these guys are considered anti-federalists. They were very much pro-state power and against stronger central government. So, if you need to pause in order to write that down, you should go ahead and do that. So because they were anti-federalists or against that stronger central government, some topics that they raised some concerns about were collecting federal taxes. They thought if we're giving our money to a stronger central government, that's just giving them more power. We want our money to go to the states so that they can have more power. Another one was that use of a standing army. They thought we don't want to have a standing army that our federal government kind of resides over and is in control of, because that, again, gives them too much power. And then the amount of national power versus state power, again, that's kind of this idea, right? They didn't want the federal government, the national level, to have all the power. They wanted that to reside in the states. And finally, the biggest concern that they had was with a lack of a Bill of Rights. Here's the thing about the Bill of Rights. Those are protecting individuals' rights, individual liberties. So the Anti-Federalists said, our government is way too strong and we do not want to ratify this Constitution unless you're going to guarantee us that you protect individual people. So sometime later, remember the Constitution was ratified in 1788, right? Yeah, 1788. So a few years later, in 1791, the first Congress of the United States introduces the Bill of Rights as a direct result of the Anti-Federalist arguments and concerns. And a lot of the Anti-Federalists were the ones who were in Congress that made that happen. So the Constitution is ratified, and almost immediately after, the Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, right? All of these amendments, the first 10 being the Bill of Rights, and they still involve individual rights, meaning rights of the people, protecting the people from the big and all-powerful, let's say, national government. If that doesn't speak anti-federalism, nothing does, right? Because they're about the people's rights and not the national federal government's power. So let's talk about those amendments that you need to know. I'm going to bring to your attention 3 of them. The first amendment protects your individual rights of freedom of speech, press, assembly, petition, and religion. Those all being pretty self-explanatory, but that you are able to speak freely. You don't have to guard your tongue when it comes to saying how you feel about your government, let's say. Now, there's going to be consequences with certain things that you say, but you are allowed to speak your mind. Press being the same thing, in that our press can publish and be totally separate from our national government. Assembly and petition, in that you can protest in a lawful way. And then finally, freedom of religion. Very self-explanatory there. Now, the Fourth Amendment is all about individual rights, of course, but individual privacy, protection against the federal government, protection against unreasonable searches and seizures, and that a police officer, FBI, whatever the agency of the government might be, they can't just walk into your house, search and seize, or take anything they want. They can't do that. That is violating your rights, right, to privacy. So this Fourth Amendment says that the government can't do that. They can't just walk in. There's some things that they have to do first in order to prove that they need to. So a quick kind of mnemonic, a quick way to help you remember that is if you hold up 4 fingers and then you kind of face them towards someone, it's kind of like rays of light. Your fingers are almost like a flashlight, right? And if you think in a search and seizure, they're going to have a flashlight and they're going to be looking for things that they need to seize and therefore investigate. So that's just a little way that at least helped me to remember when I was in high school. Finally, the Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment says lots of things, but one of the big ones that we want you to understand is that it says no one shall be deprived, right? No one shall have life, liberty, and property taken away from them without what's called due process of law. Now, in the side of your notes, somewhere you need to write down what is due process of law. What that says is if you are suspected of a crime, right, suspected of committing some kind of crime, that you are innocent until proven guilty, but that you have the right to go through the due process of law, and that there's an investigation, and then they have to prove you guilty before they can put you in jail or convict you of anything. And that due process, meaning that you have the right to an attorney and all that kind of stuff, like I said, and that you will go to trial and be tried by essentially a jury of your peers, right? And that there's that due process, there's that process of finding if someone is guilty. So that's the end of our notes for the Bill of Rights. Make sure you rewind and make sure you have, if there's any blank space, that there was something you needed to write there. So make sure you rewind and find that out and answer that reflection question. Have a great day.